All right, let's jump right in. Do you ever feel like you're just drowning in information, but you still can't quite get a handle on the real problem? Well, today, we're going to break down a really practical framework to help turn that whole sea of data into a clear, actionable map. You know this feeling right here? It's something we've all been through. This quote actually comes from a consultant, Kohei Takamatsu, who admits that even as a professional problem solver, he felt totally lost and overwhelmed. It's that anxious feeling you get when you're staring down a huge, complex challenge. And look, in today's world, this problem is just on steroids, right? With generative AI, we can get mountains of research in seconds. We have more information than at any point in history. But here's the thing, that doesn't automatically mean we have more understanding. So how do we bridge that gap? Okay, before we can solve this, we kind of have to define our goal. What does it actually feel like to understand something? Well, it's that moment when all the chaos finally starts to click into place and you can suddenly see the structure underneath it all. And this is the key difference right here. When you don't understand, you're just swamped by all these different pieces and you can't see how they're related. But true understanding, it's not about having more data. It's actually about having fewer key elements and clearly seeing the connections that make up the big picture. So how do we get there? It starts with a step that feels a little backward at first. Before you go searching for any new information, you have to stop and just recognize what you already know. The goal isn't to collect more stuff, it's to connect what's already in front of you. Think of it like this. You wouldn't just start cooking by randomly pulling things out of the pantry, would you? No way. A great chef always starts by laying out all their ingredients first. It's called the mise en place. Thinking works the exact same way. We need to get all our mental ingredients, all the facts, ideas, and data we have, out on the table before we can even think about cooking up a solution. So how do you actually do this? It's a super simple three-part process. First, just get everything out of your head and onto a whiteboard or a piece of paper. It can be doodles, single words, whatever. Second, start grouping stuff that feels similar. Don't overthink it, just cluster related ideas together. And finally, circle the things that seem most important. I'm telling you, this simple act instantly cuts down on that feeling of anxiety and gives you a sense of control. All right, so you've got your ingredients laid out on the table. Now, it's time to build the blueprint. This is the real heart of the framework, a simple, three-stage process to map out what's really going on. The process is really logical. You start at the end, with the final result. So the situation right now, let's say Q3 sales are flat. Then you break that down into its major pieces, like new customer sales, repeat business, and so on. Finally, for each of those pieces, you dig in and ask why. Why is this happening? What you're left with is a single, clear picture of reality that your whole team can actually get behind. And this is why it's so powerful. First, it forces you to see the hidden links between different parts of the problem. Second, you get that crucial bird's eye view so you can see the entire system at once. And maybe most importantly, it creates a shared map. That means everyone on the team is looking at the exact same landscape, which puts an end to those frustrating meetings where everyone's talking past each other. Now, this might be sounding a little familiar, but here's where we have to be super careful. There's a subtle but really critical trap in the way we usually solve problems, and most of us fall right into it without even realizing. A lot of us were taught some version of this, right? The what, where, why method. First, you figure out what the problem is. Then you find out where it's the worst. And finally, you analyze why it's happening. I mean, it sounds perfectly logical, but it's got a huge hidden flaw. The big risk with that traditional method is that it makes you obsessed with finding the bad parts. You're only looking at what's broken. And that kind of tunnel vision means you completely ignore massive opportunities to learn from what's actually working well. Even worse, if the why behind a problem is something you can't change, like a big market trend, you just get stuck. This holistic method avoids that by mapping out the entire system, the good and the bad, before you jump to any conclusions. And this brings us to the most exciting part. Because creating this structure, that's not the final step. It's the launch pad. The map isn't the destination. It's the starting point for the real exploration. So once you have your completed map, the first powerful question you ask is this. If we don't change a thing, where does this current path lead us in 6 months or a year? This forces you to think about the future, the risks that are coming up, and the opportunities you might be missing. It shifts your focus from just fixing today's problem to actively building a better tomorrow. But the really deep, game-changing insights, they come from the second question. You have to challenge the very foundation of your map by asking, what are we just taking for granted here? What are those unbreakable rules that everyone on the team just assumes are true, but maybe they aren't rules at all? To find these hidden assumptions, you can start by going back to your company's original mission. Or you can look for those weird outlier signals from customers, the ones that don't quite fit the pattern. You gotta question those cause and effect beliefs you've held forever. And here's the big one. Make a list of everything you think is impossible or can't be changed. That list is almost always where the biggest opportunities are hiding. So you see, by following this path, you fundamentally change your entire perspective. You go from being totally overwhelmed by a complex mess to being empowered by this new awareness of how everything actually works together. This is the whole transformation in a nutshell. You start in that fuzzy, anxious mess. You build a clear structure to make sense of it all. And it's that structure that finally allows a powerful new insight to break through. And that moment of insight, it's an amazing feeling. Like Takamatsu says, your feelings just suddenly brighten up. That frustrating, confusing fog finally lifts and you can see the path forward with total clarity. That's the reward for doing the hard work of structuring your thinking. So, this leaves us with one final question for you to think about. Using this framework, what is the one core assumption in your work, the thing everyone on your team believes just can't be changed, that you need to start questioning today? Because your next big breakthrough is probably hiding right there.